Major support for Carolina Business Review is provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. And Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
Well, one of the conspicuous things about living where we do in this region, in the Carolinas, is the growth has been so exceptional for so long that it puts a real strain on things like housing, transportation, schools, community services, et cetera, et cetera. But considering other places on this globe and in this country, these are indeed high-class problems. But nonetheless, we have real problems requiring serious debate and distinctive leadership. I'm Chris William, and thanks for supporting the most widely watched source of Carolina business, policy, and public affairs for 3 decades, seen across the Carolinas. And coming up on this program this time, what about the potential threat of global trade conflict? We might talk about that. We also might talk about individual economic opportunity and mobility and the gamut. We will discuss the continuum of these current issues. And later on, they laid claim to the largest native North Carolina brewery, craft brewing before it was cool. Leah Ashburn from Highland Brewing joins us. We hope you'll stay with us.
Gratefully acknowledging support by Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina. Please visit us at southcarolinablues.com. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Barings, a leading global asset management firm dedicated to meeting the evolving investment and capital needs of its clients. Learn more at barings.com. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Charles Thomas of the Knight Foundation, Otis Rawl from the Greater Lexington Chamber and Visitors Center, and special guest Leah Ashburn, President and CEO of Highland Brewing Company.
Hello, welcome to our program. As always, some of the good dialogue happens right before the cameras roll. Sometimes we have to stop it. Charles, welcome back. Otis, good to see you.
Good to see you.
You know, so Otis, Charles, if you guys took a snapshot of, and if you were asked to grade us meaning the Carolinas, on our overall performance of managing this exceptional growth that we've had now for, you could argue, decades, how have we done? Otis, how have we done?
I think the best we could probably do is a C. I know particularly in the Carolinas, we've got transportation issues that we finally address or begin to address as a result of legislation that's passed. I don't think we've managed the growth in the number of jobs that's been created as a result of the new manufacturing jobs and whether or not we've got a workforce prepared for those jobs. The other piece of it is you look at all the other types of infrastructure, whether it's telecommunications, whether it's how we prepare our students. The best, I think, it just came so fast on us, so quick. And when you look at the Rust Belt and people getting out of there and coming south for these jobs, it just caught everybody's surprise. And lots of times, particularly in state and local governments, it doesn't evolve until it's a crisis level. And I think it's crisis level right now with the growth that we've had in population, particularly in our 2 states and these 2 regions.
Does that ring true for you?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Otis. I mean, how exciting that we have all this growth, and how blessed are we, considering other parts of the country. But yeah, we're at an interesting point where I think our region has been, a small or kind of small town, and now we're jumping into being big. And so the thought leadership around that, about what we need, I think has been behind. In particular, I think it's not only harmed us from an infrastructure perspective, like transit and so forth, but it's harmed us from a people perspective.
In what way, Charles?
So as we were talking before, Charlotte and Raleigh, some of the bigger cities, have been listed as having challenges as it relates to economic mobility. So if you're born poor in Charlotte or in Raleigh, your chances of rising are slim. This idea of the American dream and realizing like, whoa, maybe it's not truly real. And so we have all this great growth, but not everybody's included. And so that gets to the schools that Otis were talking about, or it gets to affordable housing. So what a great thing to see all these cranes in the air, but can everybody afford to participate? Because what happens as you have all these growth and luxury apartments is it makes it unaffordable for people that are working class, that are just on the edge, and it burdens people as it relates to paying rents, and makes it hard for people to buy homes.
So back in 2004, in the summer of 2014, the Brookings Institution came out with those metros in the country that had the highest growth of accelerating poverty. Charlotte, Greenville, the upstate of South Carolina, Greensboro, the Triad area. Columbia didn't fall in it, but I was surprised by the upstate of South Carolina. All of this was highlighted. Those are among the top 10 metros. So, Otis, not to put words in your mouth, but is that what you're talking about, crisis?
I think so, and I think people tend to forget about the metropolitan areas because they look like they're flourishing and they look like they're just exuberant in growth with jobs and all. But if you go back and look at South Carolina and you look at the people that are in poverty, as a percentage, the folks in poverty are higher in our urban areas than they really are in our rural areas. And South Carolina's not a big state, but you take Columbia, Greenville, Spartanburg, maybe Florence and Charleston, you put the people in poverty in those cities, it's more than all the other rural counties that we have in the state. So we tend to think about lawsuits and all that to address our rural schools and things of that sort, when really we should be focusing more on our urban areas because that's where the largest portion of our poverty, folks living in poverty are, and it's critical in both areas, but as a percentage it's higher, and I think we've just overlooked that, and that's why I'm excited to hear what Mayor Benjamin's doing in Columbia about trying to prepare folks. But I think, Chris, we really got to go back and look at our schools and find out what kind of jobs could be available, focus on those types of jobs, educate our young people and adults to put them in the jobs that are coming. I mean, we just can't continue to put people in retail jobs. We got to put them in advanced manufacturing and educate people. Hey, these are $40,000, $50,000 jobs with benefits.
So in the lexicon in Charlotte, this new term, economic mobility and opportunity, has come up, Charles. Is that idea going to, you can't solve all ills in the community, obviously, but do you have confidence it's going to do what it needs to do in metros like Charlotte?
I have confidence that we have become aware of the problem, that we've acknowledged that we have a major issue. And as we were talking earlier, you had mentioned, how do we kind of focus, on what the big challenges are so we don't spread ourselves too thin. And so with the report that came out in Charlotte from the Opportunity Task Force, and I know some other areas of North Carolina have come out with their own reports, we recognize that some key areas are early childhood, early childhood education, universal child care. That's something that we could focus on and make happen. We know that family stability is a key piece, so that includes affordable housing, and in some cases where it might be a little controversial, it's also about, contraception and number of children. And then it's about career readiness. So getting to that vocational, providing students and young people different opportunities for, accessing, growing their economics and their career path. But some of the overarching, deep embedded things that we can't overlook is that how we got here. And we got here because we live in segregated communities. So the challenge with our schools is that people are living economically, racially, in high wealth neighborhoods and in high poverty neighborhoods. That's creating high poverty schools. We don't have integrated schools economically. And to me, that's my biggest concern. So can we do it? Yes, we have identified where the key areas are, and I think there's some early wins with universal health care, affordable housing. At least I can speak for Charlotte, and I would recommend in other regions the universal child care, and so those are things we can begin to nibble at. You're right, it's a comprehensive challenge, but it's a 20 to 30 year
So if you
challenge,
get one or two wins, just one or two wins, you think that'll build enough momentum?
It's going to build momentum because we have to understand where we need to align our resources. If you can capture, the studies have shown that, by third grade is when you can tell whether or not a child is going to graduate from high school. Right. But what we've found through this economic opportunity report is that it's really, you need to catch them before they get into kindergarten.
Yeah. Well, it's almost from the womb.
It really is from the womb.
Yeah.
And so there's great programs where they're really working with moms as soon as they have children. And so we just have to shift our mindset on where we want to invest. And so, I don't think it's necessarily a bunch of new money. It's just about shifting our resources to make sure we're taking care of that child from the beginning all the way through the pipeline.
And I mean, you're talking about egos to some degree, and we have to also have a hard conversation about who needs to lead, when and where, and who needs to not. Otis, in about a minute, bring our guest on here a second. SCANA, this seems to be the gift that keeps on giving, at least from the news cycle. The latest thing, as of at least the taping of the program, was Dominion wanted to pull out of the bidding process, which would again put SCANA and the ownership of SCANA and those that use SCANA, which are most of the population of South Carolina, at risk. What the rate pay is going to be, so on and so forth. What is going to happen to the largest utility in South Carolina?
Well, I think that's still up in the air. I don't think anything happens in the short term.
Does it worry you?
It does, at least from an economic development standpoint, as to whether or not we will have a provider, particularly in the Midlands and toward the coast, that SCANA actually supplies electricity to. What really worries me is we've already got a crisis in the Midlands. The rates are so much higher than Duke and some of the other providers that we struggle to recruit into the Midlands because of that rate. What I think the breakdown is now, Santee Cooper has sued SCANA as of this morning, which slows it down. I think the Base Load Review Act, the General Assembly talking about eliminating that and reducing the rate, probably pulls Dominion out. But there's other suitors at the table, Chris, and I think what's going to happen is we're going to have to muddle through all these other suitors that's willing to write checks for both SCANA and Santee Cooper, but I don't think it really happens within this election cycle. What happened? Everybody filed, everybody did everything, beat the drums up front. Now it's nothing but about elections, and until elections are over, they'll beat the drum, but nothing will be done probably next January.
Let me ask you a quick follow-up to that. Is there a better honest broker of this whole process than the governor's office or the State House?
I don't think it's going to happen at the governor's office. I think it's politically for him. He's got to beat the drum. But you know, we've got a legislative state, and this could be settled in the legislature. Okay.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Bring our guest on in just a moment. Coming up next week on this program, you know, everybody thinks the ACC, well, everybody in the ACC thinks that the ACC is the premier conference. Well, coming up on our program again is Commissioner John Swofford will be here talking about all things in the ACC. And then also Mark Bellissimo. Here's a guy whose star is rising for sure, and not just in western part of North Carolina. Mark Bellissimo is the author of an equestrian center in Florida that is internationally renowned, and he is also the author now of the Tryon Equestrian Center. He will be here on our program in 2 weeks. Western North Carolina, and specifically Asheville, have become a mecca and a haven for craft brewing. So what was it decades ago that Highland Brewing saw that others didn't? At the end of 1994 is when they rolled out their first kegs to the public, and now, almost a quarter of a century later, they are an integral part of what has become this nation's critical mass of independent beers and brewers. Joining us now, Highland Brewing Company President and Chief Executive Officer Leah Ashburn. Leah, welcome to the program. What a cool job you must have.
Chris, it's a very cool job. Yes, I love it.
You know, when you kind of take your temperature and you sit and really appreciate where the company has come, where the industry has come, where Western North Carolina and Asheville have come, I mean, you pinch yourself. But Leah, what do you think about? How do you say, this is great, but we've really got a plan for X, and I got to be careful of Y. So how do you fill that in?
Yeah, there are a lot of challenges that come with rapid growth. As the other guests were saying, there's two sides to all of that. So the proliferation of breweries in North Carolina alone, we're at about 260 right now, and South Carolina is blowing up. So it has changed the competitive set dramatically. And that brings with it a couple of problems. The rate of expansion really hasn't allowed for the training, the proper background for folks to fill all those jobs that quickly. So I'm not sure that we have all the people we need at all the levels we need to fill all of these breweries. At the same time, you know, there's a lot of excitement. There's still so much innovation, and there is room for more breweries. I think we'll continue to see growth in the number of breweries. I don't think all of them are going to survive because of that sort of spread in quality and the rapid growth and people being able to fill that effectively.
Otis?
Well, you know, Chris, kind of like the old country song, I like beer. And, you know, and what I've found out real interesting about the whole craft brewing industry is it's brought a new taste to beer and the traditional beers. I mean, you can almost get whatever you want. But for me as a nonprofit and me as the people that represent retailers and all that, I think one of the problems is this three-tier system, particularly in South Carolina, that breweries have to go through to sell it through wholesalers and directly to retailers. That's a tough concept, and I think it's pretty archaic, particularly in how you have to deal with the different states and all. Are any thoughts about eliminating like a three-tier system where you can deal directly with the retailers and the restaurants and all, rather than have to go through a third party to get your product distributed?
All right, that's a great question because there's passionate debate on both sides. I think that the third party is critical. Distributors are absolutely necessary. And from day one, Highland, for example, chose to work with distributors. So we don't want to be in the transportation and logistics business. And at our size, it would be crippling for us to try to take that on. I think that some of the franchise laws could be adjusted to provide more freedom for breweries to choose when and how they work with a distributor. But as far as some passionate debate in North Carolina, I don't really have a dog in that fight. So I try to just let that kind of
try to be Switzerland in that way.
Yes.
Yeah. Charles.
So my question is, and I think you mentioned this, is around saturation. It just feels like there are breweries are popping up on every corner, but not just one, two, or three. Mm-hmm. And so just share your thoughts on how much room you think there's left. And I think a follow-up question is, what makes a brewery unique now? I mean, how do you distinguish yourself?
Yeah, that's actually so relevant for Highland today. So we just went through a brand refresh, and this was less than 2 months ago. It was the first time we had done it since we started in 1994. And a lot of things happened in 24 years, so we discovered that what our visual brand showed and what our beer is were not sending the same message. So we wanted to align that, and I think we've done it really well. But it leaves a lot of discussion for what message you're sending and how much room there is in the market. You've got to communicate really clearly. So that was the impetus behind some of our change. I think, again, there's room for more breweries, but I really want people to buy local, and I want them to buy quality. That helps brewers do a better job, and we all are, because we tend to lean on each other a lot. It's a unique thing in our industry. The collaboration is still there, and it's really wonderful, and it's rare. In my prior career, that was just not the case. So it's something I really enjoy. It's something I want to foster. So that all of the beer is better, and then the consumers end up benefiting from that.
When you talk about barriers for growth, Leah, one of the issues is the states, as you kind of alluded to, Otis. The states themselves say, "Yep, you're a craft beer. You can only do so many cases of so many kegs annually." I've talked to some of the guys at Old Mecklenburg Brewery, and they are out front with this idea that they're being attenuated by current state laws. So how do you, with respect, approach a General Assembly, Leah, and say that, some of the old prohibitive rules that are in place are not really applicable? Help us expand this. How do you, I guess, give respect to both sides of an argument, but still say the time has come to allow us to grow this business beyond those old numbers?
Chris, that's the exact argument that I don't get involved in, because we already work with distributors, and we're actually past that self-distribution limit in North Carolina. So even if it went up, we would.
It would benefit you one way.
We wouldn't change what we're doing.
Do you feel like the distributors are working, and I know this is the wrong way to say it, are they skeptical of how you and others say it, or do they really believe that you are trying to work with them?
Well, I think it depends on who you're talking to. So someone who is very passionate and their business depends on a change in that law, they're going to speak about it very differently from someone who is producing 400 barrels a year, and they really have no interest in, or no sense of the future when they might be working with distributors. It's just not on their radar. So I know it's a really big deal for some folks, but I feel like I'm very separate from it. some things could change, but I don't think it will necessarily affect what we're doing.
Yeah, okay. Odie?
Well, Leah, I look at where the growth is, and it tends to be in high tourist-related areas. Like Charleston has a fast-growing craft beer industry, and of course Asheville's kind of the mecca. And everybody just, I'm sure the synergy creates some stuff. But I know tourists has got a lot to do with it, but why do you think people migrated? And I think there's 28 or 29 different craft brewing entities in Asheville. What caused Asheville to be that place? I know y'all were there first and kind of created it, but what continued to growth? What's unique about Asheville?
Well, what's interesting about that is that my family and I used to live in Charlotte, and my father met an award-winning brewer in Charlotte. And he said, if you'd like to partner up, I'd love to do it, but I'm not interested in staying here. I see the potential in Asheville. My family had fallen in love with Asheville anyway, just through travel and staying there for vacations. But I think he would never admit this. I think that he saw the potential in kind of there's just a quality of life pursuit. There's a love of great food, of craft-made anything in Asheville that runs really deep. I mean, like decades old. And so that kind of lifestyle really lent itself toward craft beer, and it also kind of mirrors the cultures that you find in the most craft beer forward cities in America that kind of led this revolution that we've seen and this new really exciting business that the U.S. has led worldwide and is really proud of.
Charles?
So I'm fascinated with what you're just saying, because I was just thinking about, trying to compare it to something old. Maybe it's like the old pub, but it's, open space. It's, I see people bringing their children, dogs to it, and it's a new concept for bringing folks together. So I was curious, just around innovation, are things since you all started, have there been things that has innovation kind of hit the space? Do you see opportunity for innovating, expanding upon the concept? Are you seeing it in other cities that have not, or other parts of the country that has not come to Charlotte or come to this area yet?
I think there's a lot of room left for innovation. I just believe in the whole industry. We're still so young, and there is still much left to do that is really exciting. And I think at Highland we're trying to innovate, but do things really well from the start. So we have a couple of programs that are cooking away right now that we haven't released, that our whole staff is just so engaged in and really wanting to see them fly when they come out. We've done a whole lot of new beers, and that's part of innovation, is just creating your own recipes. Every brewery has their own feel, as you're saying, whether they're family-friendly, dog-friendly, outside spaces, indoor, and that's a really wonderful and natural thing about breweries, is that they're community gathering spaces. And they're really not about overindulgence. Right. They're about enjoyment of a fun product in a safe and communal way.
That's interesting. So let me take we've got about 2 minutes left, Leah. The community aspect, the leadership that Highland's had in Asheville and Western North Carolina. Jack Cecil from Biltmore, of course the iconic family from Biltmore, was here not long ago, and Jack talked about the idea of remapping what Asheville looks like. What do you see as your leadership role? It's not just you as president and CEO, but Highland's leadership to the region, to others. How do you fit into what Asheville needs to look like, or where you need to head with that?
Wow. Well, I'm delighted to be in Asheville. We've always been so proud to be there, and we want the city to be proud of us. So it's important to us.
I think that's worked so far. So good job.
Thank you. So to continue the trajectory that we've been on, I would sleep really well for the rest of my life if I knew we could continue that. But continuing to offer an excellent product is number one. And being an example of a great business. So in all ways, do we contribute to the community? Are we sensitive to our guests' needs, but also the community's needs? Are we operating on the highest level that we know how in every business practice that we can?
Is the rebranding that you just went through, was it, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, was it surprisingly self-discovery for you as an organization? When you went through rebranding and you said, our product and what we were doing weren't necessarily even, was it surprising what you came up with internally for yourselves?
It was a little bit surprising. I think a third party looks at you better, more clearly than you look at yourself after 24 years. Right. So it was really helpful, and we discovered that our visual was 100% Scottish And our beer is 0% Scottish. So some folks thought that we were an import or that we should be making Scottish beer, and that's a really great point. So we wanted to call to the fact that we are proud to be in the Southern Appalachians, so we have a mountainscape on most of our beers, and that we're Asheville's pioneers. So we simplified a compass to show that we're still creating an amazing path, we're still innovating, and we were the first ones there.
Well, fun for you, and congratulations. Second generation family leadership. I know your father's proud. We're proud of having you in the state.
Thanks.
Thank you for being on the program, Leah.
My pleasure.
Nice to see you. Charles, welcome back.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you.
Thank you.
Otis, welcome. Always nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you. And thank you for watching our program. If you have any questions or comments, please, carolinabusinessreview.org. Watch programs, comment on dialogue. Thank you for watching. Until next week, I'm Chris William. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, Bearings, Grant Thornton, Novant Health, Sunoco, Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, and by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.org.